A big war or just a big bluff? Russia has at least asserted that it does not want a war in Eastern Europe, but the information from Western secret services is anything but reassuring. No one in the West knows what Russian President Vladimir Putin intends to do with the soldiers and the weapons he's having deployed west. Moscow denies plans to invade Ukraine. However, thanks to spy satellites and other reconnaissance methods, the secret services have quite a very good overview of the current situation. And this looks grim, especially when combined with the analyses that have been made of Putin himself. So let's talk about that for a little bit today. The intelligence services from the USA and other NATO countries assume that between 112,000 and 120,000 Russian soldiers are now stationed in areas not far from Ukraine. Heavy weapons, tanks, and most recently landing ships and units of the medical service with blood reserves were transferred with the troops, as is evident from talks with Western intelligence officials. More Russian soldiers are expected to take part in military maneuvers in Belarus, north of Ukraine, which are about to begin. They will also be deployed with S-400 air defense systems and tanks, as well as Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets. There are no indications of an end to the march, a senior Western Secret Service representative told the German press agency, for example. In concrete terms, it's therefore considered likely that the number of tactical battalion groups, BTGs, which is currently estimated at around 60, could be increased to more than 100 by mid-February. The BTGs are fast and highly flexible combat units with 600 to 1,000 soldiers. In the event of a Russian attack, the BTGs could be supported by the approximately 35,000 armed forces of the Kremlin-affiliated separatists in Donbass. They are not included in the more than 100,000 Russian soldiers counted. According to military experts, if the deployment continues as feared, Russia could be in a position to launch a full-scale invasion and subsequent occupation in just 2 weeks. However, it's also considered possible that only half of the country will be taken, or that only a corridor should be created from the already annexed Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea towards Moldova and Romania. Another option is an official move into Donbass, which is already controlled by the separatists, where Russian soldiers would then see themselves as a kind of peacekeeping force, possibly even after the separatist areas have been expanded. According to the analysts, a possible attack on the Ukrainian capital Kiev could come from Belarus, but also from northeastern Ukraine. According to the analysts, whether Putin chooses one of these options, and if so, which one, will depend on the one hand on the willingness to take risks, and on the other hand on what goal he actually wants to achieve. Any attack is likely to be accompanied by extensive cyber attacks on the energy supply system, government authorities, as well as on the telecommunication systems, TV and radio stations. The aim would be to quickly isolate the country and create chaos and concern among as many people as possible, explains one intelligence official. Why might Putin risk attacking Ukraine? From the point of view of the Western services, this is very clear. He wants Ukraine back, is the analysis. From Putin's point of view, the Russians and the Ukrainians are one people. Ukraine does not exist at all, just as there is no independent Ukrainian people. That is why Putin is committed to returning Ukraine to Russia, or at least to his sphere of influence. There is a glimmer of hope that precisely because of this way of thinking, Putin probably has no interest in destroying the country too much in the event of an attack. It is therefore seen as a very likely option for Russia to launch an offensive that will only last a few days or weeks and then go to the negotiating table. There, it could then give the other negotiators a choice. Either there is a capitulation or the offensive continues. Possibly, Putin's main concern is to remove the pro-Western Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Kremlin boss seems to be personally quite fixated on Zelensky, it's said. According to the services, Putin could use the pretext for a limited military operation in eastern Ukraine to protect the Russian minority from an imminent genocide by mad Ukrainian fascists. And Putin's narrative would then be he had no other choice. The regular Russian assurances that they have no plans for an attack are not taken seriously by the secret services, especially since Putin himself threatened shortly before Christmas, if the rather aggressive line of our Western colleagues is continued, we will respond with adequate military technical measures, he said. Some experts were recently convinced that the appropriate time window for a large-scale Russian attack should close at the end of February for the time being. After that, as the snow melts, the ground softens and tanks and other heavy vehicles would have a very hard time advancing. However, other experts warn against thinking this way. They point out that the Russian armed forces have large quantities of modern guided missiles and could parachute large numbers of troops to their destinations. They would find a way to deal with the snowmelt, they say. On the other hand, it is considered possible that the Olympic Winter Games in Beijing, which begin next Friday, will play a role in the upcoming decisions. Because there is a reason. An attack during this time could damage Putin's image even more and antagonize the entire West as well as Chinese President Xi Jinping. Russia has backed a UN resolution calling for an Olympic ceasefire during the Olympic Games from February 4th to 20th and the Paralympics from March 4th to 13th in Beijing. As part of the Olympic truce, all sides are required to cease hostilities throughout the Games, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently. A debate has broken out in the Social Democratic Party in Germany about arms deliveries to Ukraine. Meanwhile, security expert Ischinger laments Germany's loss of international reputation. After former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, Sigmar Gabriel, another former SPD chairman, is crossing the line of the party leadership in the Ukraine crisis. The ex-foreign minister calls for a discussion without taboos and bans on thought on the issue of arms deliveries to Ukraine. The truth is, you can always be guilty of arms deliveries by acting and by not acting, he told this to a German newspaper on Sunday. Party leader Lars Klingbeil promptly confirmed the SPD's leadership's rejection of arms deliveries. We are happy to take advice, and it's totally okay if others get involved in the debate. But those who are responsible for the party are clear and unequivocal, he said in an interview with the German public television program Berlin Direct. Neither Schröder nor Gabriel still have a function in the SPD today. In the podcast The Agenda on Friday, Schröder accused NATO of complicity in the Russian troop deployment on the Ukrainian border and accused Ukraine of saber-rattling because of its demands for weapons. The chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the German Bundestag, Michael Roth, rejected Schröder's statement on the news portal NTV. I prefer to stick to the facts, and they leave no doubt as to who is responsible for the current military escalation. And this Monday, Klingbeil met with other leading SPD politicians for a closed conference on the Ukraine crisis. And the well-known security expert Wolfgang Ischinger sounded the alarm at the weekend because he already sees a noticeable loss of international reputation for Germany because of its restraint in the Ukraine crisis. Awkwardness on the part of the federal government in dealing with the controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and the issue of arms deliveries have meant that Germany is now in a lousy bad light in the USA and with other allies, said the head of the Munich Security Conference to the German press agency. And he said, Germany has already lost the trust of a number of partners or is at risk of losing it. The federal government is accused of not putting enough pressure on Russia during the crisis. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has hesitated for a long time before he put the controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline on the table as a sanctions instrument in the event of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that only in a cryptic way. So, 2 months in office and this government is already ruining a lot. At the time, unlike other allies, he clearly rejected the delivery of lethal weapons to Ukraine. This has been criticized by Ukraine, but also by countries like Poland and the Baltic states. In the USA, the question is also being raised as to whether Germany is still a reliable partner. Everything that has been said about Germany in Washington, Brussels, and Kiev, and written in the international press in recent days, has made him fear and anxious, said Ischinger. And I can understand Ischinger. There have been some clumsiness. I don't think they can be repaired, but reputation damage has already occurred, he says. A lot will have to be done to repair this damage. Well, what damage can they do in the rest of the 4 years? Ischinger also complained that Germany's reluctance was playing into Russia's hands. Of course, the wobbling of various German politicians was precisely registered in Moscow, said the former German ambassador in Washington, who is one of the most experienced German diplomats and has chaired the Munich Security Conference for 14 years. For Ischinger, the fact that Germany is in such a bad position now has to do with Nord Stream 2. He described the controversial gas pipeline from Russia to Germany as a thorn in the flesh of German foreign policy. He says, I have the suspicion that we in German politics in Berlin somewhat underestimated the size of this thorn and its negative effect. And this thorn has now exploded with the issue of arms deliveries. With the weapons, the impression was created that we were standing at the end of the convoy with our hands folded, he complained. In view of Germany's open flank at Nord Stream 2, he would have thought it would be more clever to position themselves in the middle, if possible on the basis of an EU decision. In view of Germany's mediation role in the Ukraine conflict, a certain restraint on the subject of arms deliveries made sense, said Ischinger. But that doesn't have to mean that we have to let ourselves be pulled through the as we would say in Germany, be pulled through the cocoa and publicly in the world. Ischinger does not consider the criticism of Germany to be entirely fair and refers to the extensive German economic and financial aid for Ukraine and the diplomatic commitment to solving the Ukraine conflict that has lasted for years. But the communication policy of the federal government was not appropriate to the importance of this process, he says. And I so much agree with Ischinger on this one. And I really fear for our foreign policy in the next 4 years. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.